everyone, I'm Tori.
And I'm Kariana.
And welcome to God in All Things. And today we're back on our musical game. It has been about almost a year since we did a musical that was just a standard movie musical.
Was the last one was Sound of Music?
Yeah.
Dang.
So we've really been slacking, which is why we chose this one today, because it's been a hot minute. And so we're doing Singin' in the Rain. So let's kick off with our summary and then we'll discuss some personal experiences as per usual. So Don and Lena are the shining stars of the silent film era. Unfortunately, they don't get along very well. And when talkies, or films with full audio, become the new fad, their relationship is damaged even further. Thankfully, Don has found a new beau, Kathy, an up-and-coming actress and singer who is able to bring new light into his life. But will Kathy be hurt in Don and Lena's crossfire? We will find out.
Yes, spoiler disclaimer.
Yes, spoiler disclaimer, she will. Right at the end of the movie, because this is a very musical number-based film, which we were discussing a little bit earlier. But personal experiences, I don't really have a lot to say, to be totally honest. I've seen clips of it throughout my life, but I've never really watched the full movie until... Actually, I think I had seen the stage production first. I just saw it literally was it last year that it was at Hale?
I don't remember.
I think so. And so it was literally just the last time it was at Hale Center, which was, I'm pretty sure, last year. And I enjoyed it. It was fun. I didn't know the full story of it, so it was fun to get that full context. And then I did see the film after it, and then this is the second time I've seen the film. So I don't have a lot of background in it, but I think it's a fun, classic musical. It's not my personal favorite just because I'm more of an emotional story kind of person. I like the characters and getting into their emotions and their emotions in relationships and a lot of that. And I just feel like this one kind of is more of a surface level feel-good kind of musical, which is still fun and enjoyable, but it's not necessarily a favorite of mine. So that's how I feel about it, but I have a lot of respect for it and recognize the love a lot of people have for it, and don't diminish it. It's just not my tastes that make me fall head over heels in love with it the way I do some other musicals.
Yeah, you can't deny the fact that it's definitely feel good, happy.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I could not tell you how many times I've seen this movie. I love Singin' in the Rain. It's so fun. And I listened to the soundtrack in the car today because I was just so excited to talk about it, and I can just sing along to the whole thing, and I just love it so much. My whole family is Gene Kelly fanatics, and I fall into that, so I've watched most of Gene Kelly's movies. I did a marathon a couple years ago and watched just as many as I could get my hands on, including a documentary all about Gene Kelly. My dad has a big giant illustrated book of Gene Kelly's life and career, and we just fan over Gene Kelly. So yeah, I love the singing. I love the tap dancing. I am just a sucker for tap dance. I love anything with tap dance. I do have
appreciation for the tap dance for sure.
Yeah. And and I love those old, just feel good 50s musicals. They're some of my favorites. So love. I guess none of them actually make it on my top favorite musicals list if I actually stop and think about it, but I love watching them all the time.
Yes.
So
You have a lot of enjoyment with them. Absolutely.
So the gospel principle we're going to be talking about in relation to Singin' in the Rain is valuing differences. And so just kind of a very short and sweet summary of that. Each of us have a different part to play in the gospel, and it's important to remember how powerful our differences can be in bringing Christ into each other's lives. So to start the movie off, we meet our lead man, and as Tori phrased it, our lead problem.
Our lead problem. Good old Lena.
So our lead man is Don Lockwood, and our lead problem is Lena Lamont. And like Tori mentioned, they are the stars of the era. Lockwood and Lamont movies, right? They're the big thing. So we meet Don, and we learn that he kind of grew up with nothing and worked his way up in the movie and film world next to his best friend Cosmo, and now he's here and he's a star and everybody loves him. And Lena is kind of a full of herself. We see it right off the bat, like when Dawn is a nobody, she like doesn't give him the time of day. And then as soon as he becomes famous, she's like, oh, hey. And he doesn't fall for it for 1 second. There's absolutely no romance as far as he's concerned.
No. But on her side, she likes the idea of it.
She's kind of an idiot. And she reads tabloid magazines. And they all say that Dawn and Lena are engaged. And so she figures they're engaged. And Dawn has to remind her not to believe everything she reads in the paper.
Even though it's literally about her and she knows that that's not true.
Yes. So it's kind of an interesting relationship there, but you know, he likes being a star and they make lots of money and it's whatever. And so he goes with it. So Don is on his way to premiere of the new Lockwood and Lamont movie, or like the after party after the premiere.
Yes.
And he gets mobbed by some adoring fans and gets a little bit beat up and runs away by jumping in a random woman's car. And she freaks out. She's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? I'm going to call the police. What's going on? And she sees a policeman, and the policeman recognizes him. And he's like, wow, you're one lucky lady. And she's like, oh. And this is how we meet our main love interest, Kathy.
Yes.
So she kind of thinks that he's a jerk right off the bat. And he actually kind of is a jerk right off the bat.
He's definitely like, he just jumped in her car, first of all, and is like expecting her to like be
to
okay
fall
with
over
it,
him.
ultimately.
Yeah.
And then like trying to make a play for her afterwards when she's like,
she shows compassion.
Kind of like a lack of consent is what we'd call it nowadays. Yes. There's a lack of consent kind of feel there, and so she's not having it for sure.
Yeah, she's like in shock. She's like, your fans did this to you? Because he's like all torn up and everything, and he's like, yeah, poor me. And like, yeah, tries, like you said, tries to make a play for her. And she's like, okay, weirdo. And it turns out that she's a stage actress, and so then he makes fun of her for that pretty hardcore. Yes. And so then she gets mad at him, and then she makes fun of like moving pictures. Yes. So they kind of get off on the wrong foot. But she gets him where he needs to go. And then lo and behold, she turns out to be performing at the party that he's at. And so he tries to get a hold of her, but she runs away and avoids him. So now he's all smitten and sad that he doesn't know.
Although part of this experience, and I feel like it's probably going to come into play a little bit with my discussion of the gospel principle and what I was thinking about, where at this party when he's trying to get a hold of her, he's kind of still making fun of her because this event is like he's finding out that she's not actually a stage actress, she just wants to be. She's actually in this like dancing company that's there, and that's why she's there. And so he's still kind of being a jerk and making fun of her, and so she ends up deciding to throw a pie in his face, but it doesn't hit him, it hits Lena, which does not please Lena. She's already upset because she notices Dawn chasing after Kathy, and she thinks they're supposed to be engaged, and so she's very upset that they're even talking to each other, and then the pie ends up in her face, and now she personally has it out for Kathy.
Yes.
So that does come into play throughout the story, but this is kind of where that really starts for the problem.
That really personal.
That personal vendetta that's there.
For sure. And you can kind of see too, I think Don, he's not like you said, he's still making fun of her, but he has this realization that he like wants her to like him. He's like slightly, you can kind of see the remorse in him a little bit, like, oh no, wait. It's
almost like because in the car he's making a play for her, so he's like attracted to her in that moment, and then she kind of fights him off, and it kind of makes him more intrigued and seeing her as like a person, not an object, kind of a transition. And then when she pops out of the cake and stuff, there's even more probably intrigue, even though he is making fun of her, and she's still fighting back, and he's again finding that intriguing and more humanizing. And so you're right, at this point he starts to develop more of an interest in her as a person, woman, as a person, and not so much just as a pretty face.
Okay, so then we see now we have the hard to get dilemma where now Dawn is obsessed with Kathy. Yes. She disappears for a while. I think they say 2 weeks, and he like can't stop thinking about her, and he's talking to his best friend about it, and Cosmo is like, "You're still thinking about that girl? Like, okay, so go find her." Yes. You know. Mm-hmm. And I think it is Cosmo who finally sees her, right?
Yes,
who finds her. So
mm-hmm.
she's working in a commercial, if I remember
I think
right.
So, yes.
I actually didn't rewatch the movie for this. So yeah, Kathy's working on this commercial, so we get this really exciting, random, weird commercial musical number.
This musical really just has a lot of like really random musical numbers that, I mean, they fit in there. It's not like it's totally off the wall most of the time as far as like it connects somehow, but it very much is like, pause, here's a fun little musical number for some reason
that doesn't actually matter.
Like not like it's never about the really emotional aspects of the play, I think, or of the musical. I think that's what is just different about it for me.
Except love songs. Yes, really emotional love songs.
Yes.
Yeah, so Cosmo just so happens to see Kathy on the set of this commercial, and he's like, whoa. And so like he tells Dawn where she is and how to find her. And so Dawn is there immediately, and he's like super apologetic, and he's like, I'm so sorry, like I was a jerk, and and kind of expresses his feelings towards her. And then we get one of those really deep emotional numbers now that they don't know each other, but he's finally found her.
You know, 50s.
This is what I love
Hollywood.
About it.
It's
we don't even have to care.
Love at first sight. They're just pretty much.
Love.
Yes,
it's great.
Nice and fast.
And so yeah, I like to see kind of. I like that you brought up that humanizing aspect of it, because I really, both Dawn and Kathy, I think, grow. Maybe not, we can't claim like a ton. It is just kind of a feel good. They're not focused on like a whole lot of character development, but we do see, I really enjoyed this scene where they're both really willing to kind of humble themselves and come to each other and apologize for their different roles in that fight that they had. And Kathy admits that she's actually seen every Lockwood and Lamont movie and she loves them. And and he apologizes for insulting her and then expresses these strong feelings to her. And so I love that with these two characters, they're really the only two characters that we see this growth and kind of coming together on. And I love their willingness to, and talking about, like our differences and different parts and roles that we play. These two people who are kind of at different journeys along parallel career paths. They're doing similar but different or want to be doing similar but different things and are at different stages in it. And they're both willing to kind of take a step back and respect what the other person is doing, even though they feel more passionately and protective of what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it, even if it happens a little too fast and it's because she's hard to get. Whatever. That's not the point.
Ultimately, this movie is not really, like, it's about their romance, but there's a lot more focus kind of on outside influences on where their romance is able to be as far as, like, public light versus private and things like that.
It's true. So. Yeah, they get together really, really fast, and there's not really a whole lot of problems with their relationship. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It's external factors and help. Because he kind of has to keep up this public face with Lena, which is really hard on Kathy.
Yes.
But she handles really well until Lena kind of figures out what's going on and
manipulates the situation.
Exactly.
And causes issues, yeah.
Yeah, Kathy has to be kept a hardcore secret from Lena, because Lena, and that's part of the problem actually, is that Lena got Kathy fired from the studio, and that's why Dawn can't find her. So Lena can't know about Kathy, otherwise there's no stopping her from ruining her career.
Which she does. She does other times.
Yes.
Spoiler alert.
Yes, that will happen again. Yes. That'll happen again. Anyway, so then kind of our main really plot of the show is the fact that we have this transition, like Tori mentioned in the summary, where we go from moving silent films to what we call talkies, right? So now sound has been introduced to movies and it's the new big thing, and all of these studios are jumping on this fad of adding sound to their movies, and their studio doesn't want to be left behind, and so their producer is like, okay, we have to try this, we have to try a talkie, and everybody's like, okay. And so they get everything ready and they're like, okay, yeah, we can do this, and so they film a film like they normally would but add sound and talking, and it turns out to be a horrible disaster. Yes. It is just comical. It's awful. Everyone hates it. Lockwood and Lamont are the laughing stock of Hollywood.
And primarily it's because Lena's voice is very obnoxious. It's not a pretty voice. She's like a beautiful face, but her voice does not match.
It's very nasally and
very
high.
nasally, and she has an accent that's not very appealing, kind of more that like southern a little bit. And people just, I guess maybe it's like more New York. I don't know. What is that?
Kind of a weird,
it's like a weird blend of
it's weird
accents. It's kind of a strange one.
It's probably it's not her natural voice, so it's probably not any
it's
actual
like some
accent.
sort of made up accent. Yeah. Anyway, so she just doesn't sound pretty in it. So that's the biggest thing. And then she also isn't very good at knowing where the microphone is, but neither is Don either.
Oh yeah, Don isn't good at it either.
And he like tries to change the lines to work with what he's done in the past, but like it doesn't work in a scripted
he's very
kind of
dramatic, over dramatic, and everybody, and everybody, once you can hear him talking, it just feels so much weirder and more comical than just reading the words on the screen. They all have issues with microphones, honestly. Lena has issues, Dawn has issues, but then even like there's a moment where she's like playing with pearls, and these pearls sound just like so ridiculous. Because they're so loud in the microphone.
So like background noises and other like thuds and things that are just hitting the microphones, and so it's just was not working.
Oh my gosh, there's the moment Don's character sees Lena's character and he like stops and he's like all happy to see her, and he like throws his sword. And so he like throws it and he like stops, and then a second later it's like and then he starts moving. Oh my gosh, they did such a... And then at the premiere too, the sound gets off. They have like technical issues, and so then there's some really comical moments with like the sound being off from where the film is at. So just everything that can go wrong goes wrong. Anyway, so it's a horrible failure. The producer is like, oh no, I'm out of business. Like, I'm lost. It's over. And so they have to figure out how to save the movie. And Dawn and Kathy and Cosmo are all kind of hanging out one night and sing the classic beloved song, Good Morning.
Yes, very classic.
Yes, in every orange juice commercial.
Yes. Orange juice, coffee, those things.
We love Good Morning. And they come up with the idea to make a musical, to turn it into a musical instead. I don't know if they say why they think that'll save the movie, but they
maybe
figure,
make it so it's a little more fun and less serious in an over dramatic way, so it'd flow better, probably. Yeah.
Add song and dance, everybody.
And it's more natural for Don. I think that's what inspires them to think that, because he sounds more natural almost through a musical format, just because of his background and stuff, than he does in like trying to deliver lines. Right.
Yes, he does have a vaudeville background. We do learn that at the beginning of the movie. So he's used to doing like dancing and singing, performing skits. But yeah, so they like get super excited. We sing Good Morning. We're all happy about the idea. And then somebody goes, oh, Lena. Lena can't sing. And so then we're like, oh no. And so then we get the pivotal
It's even better
idea.
though when Cosmo's like, sorry, just this great line where he's like, she can't sing, she can't dance, she can't act. Triple threat.
Triple threat.
Oh my gosh, yes. My goodness.
Oh, Cosmo, I freaking love him.
Winning line, too, love it.
Yes. Cosmo, perfect comedic relief character.
Yes,
I love
he's
him.
Fabulous.
Anyway, so they come up with the idea to have Kathy sing for Lena, right? Which is gonna, since this is the introduction of talkies, so this is a completely new concept as far as they're concerned, right? Obviously, like, this had been done in Hollywood before, but but yeah, so they decide to have Kathy sing in Lena's place, but Lena can't know about it because she'll be super upset. And so they kind of start this secret, like Lena's performing and doing the songs, but Kathy's they're actually recording her and putting Kathy's voice in. So after this scene, Dawn walks Kathy home, and we get the beautiful beautiful scene where it's raining outside. You don't know what's coming. And Kathy says, "You better get home. This California dew is a little heavier than usual." And Dawn is like, "Really? From where I'm standing, it's sunshine all over."
Oh, the corniest
Stop.
or 50s romance lines. Oh my goodness.
Stop. Can't even. I'm just so in love with Gene Kelly. Anyway, so then he sings Singin' in the Rain. He's all happy. He's happy again. And yeah, if you don't know Singin' in the Rain, just go enjoy it. Just go enjoy. It's actually, I've learned a little bit about the scene. It's actually really impressive. If you pay attention, you like the fact that you can see all of the raindrops falling down is actually remarkable.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like dark outside. It's dark and he's perfectly lit up and you can see all of the rain in the water. And I was reading, apparently there are lots of myths that they put milk in the water so that they would show up, but it's not true.
Okay.
It's actually just like really, really impressive backlighting. Like they lit him from the front and backlit everything, but like had to make sure that the cameras weren't noticeable in any of the shop windows because he's in front of all of these shops. But they managed to just finagle it just right so that the water is all backlit and shows up on the cameras.
That's very impressive.
Gene was no joke. He was he was a perfectionist and he did it.
Amazing.
But yeah, so that's just super cool little side bit for you.
It was like we have to dwell on that scene a little bit because it is the iconic part of this whole movie. It is the titular song, so it must be mentioned. But we don't really have a lot to talk about. I mean, it's not a huge plot moment,
So then we kind of go into this montage of them making all of the changes for the musical. Like I mentioned, we see Lena recording, we see Kathy recording, we see kind of dancing, we see them practicing their vowel sounds and getting, and them like preparing. Get another really random but awesome, amazing, fun song, Moses Supposes.
Yes. Another great one,
And so we get it all put together. Everything's ready. It's ready to become a musical. And Lena finds out.
Yes. And is clearly not happy.
She is not happy
about the situation.
Yes. And so Lena is, she does not value everyone's respective parts in a respectful way. I guess she does value them ultimately. She decides that Kathy's whole job and purpose at the studio should be to be her voice. So she values Kathy very much as a make me look good, completely uncredited, right? This is just what you're going to do. You're going to be my voice and that's it. Which did happen. There were lots of people at this time in Hollywood who did uncredited work like that, including, here's my other, I'm a nerd about Singin' in the Rain, my other fun tidbit, Debbie Reynolds, who plays Kathy, her singing is actually dubbed. It's not
really?
Debbie Reynolds' voice.
Interesting.
So Kathy dubbing for Lena is dubbed by another woman who went uncredited
That
in
is
the movie.
so sad. Oh my gosh. Oh, the
hypocrisy.
hypocrisy.
Isn't it kind of hypocritical that they make this whole movie about like the brutality of Kathy being forced to be an uncredited voice?
And then have an uncredited voice. I'm like, the least you can do is credit the voice.
Right. At
Okay.
least. And she did Elizabeth Noyes. I think it's Elizabeth. And she was in The Sound of Music. She was in The Wizard of Oz. Like she was a really popular like voice in musicals at the time, but credited for her Wikipedia actually has a section that is like known career because we're like,
there's so much she could have done.
We don't know what she was a part of. But yeah, so there's kind of a fun tidbit for you that and then there's a line, I think it's in the musical, that Kathy says for Lena, that's until the stars turn cold or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And that's actually Lena talking. Like it's
like the actress
that plays Lena. It's
okay,
her talking.
I was gonna say, when I heard
voice.
it, I was like, that sounds not like Kathy, not like Debbie Reynolds. So that's interesting.
And I think I've read different sources that kind of attribute this uncredited actress Elizabeth Noyes to like different songs. So some people will say, like, a lot of sources say that she did 2 of the songs. And I read an interview once with Gene Kelly's first wife, who he was married to during this, who like just kind of said, oh yeah, Elizabeth Noyes dubbed the music for Debbie Reynolds. She just said it very vaguely, but I feel like you can kind of hear it. Like when she's singing Good Morning, it doesn't sound like Would You, like in Would You, her voice is like very full and rich, and and it's just different from her like Good Morning, like she sounds different. So I think you can kind of, and Would You is one of the ones that every source will say that Elizabeth Noyes did. So I feel like you can kind of tell if you like are really listening for it. You can hear Debbie Reynolds like really kind of fun, not super trained voice versus like our really trained
That's so
singer on the other side.
The more you know.
The more you know. Anyway, so moving on. Okay, so Lena comes in with her contract with the studio and says that the studio isn't allowed to do anything that slanders her name. And she decides that saying that she's not doing her own singing slanders her name. So she essentially like forces the producer, RF, to not credit Kathy, right? Yeah. And he's kind of a like, I don't want to say weak character. Yeah, he has a good heart,
but he's also easily a businessman too.
That too.
He's more focused on the money than anything else.
Yeah.
That's what matters to him. That's where his true value lies. He has a good moral compass.
Yeah.
Enough to
tries.
Try to do what he can. But he does want to like make money and do what a businessman does, and so when that's threatened, then he folds easy.
Yes, yeah, and Lamont is a big name, that he'd be losing a big name and getting in big trouble if she were to sue him or anything. But yeah, so basically RF decides like, okay, yeah, we're gonna go with it, but just for this one picture, right? Or no. RF agrees to keep doing it, but Kathy and Dawn have decided just for the one picture, and then it's revealed to them later by Lena like, no, this is actually going to keep happening.
Yes.
And so the musical is a huge success. Everybody loves it. So we're at the premiere of the musical and everybody's freaking out and calling for a speech, right? And this is where we get Lena reveals what her plan is, and Dawn and Cosmo and Kathy are all freaking out, and RF is like, guys, I don't know. Like everybody's freaking out. I don't know what to do. And Lena decides that she wants to give a speech because nobody ever lets her talk because they're always trying to hide her voice. And so she goes out and gives a speech, and everybody is like, what the heck?
That's not what she sounded like.
We just watched this whole movie and that is not her. And so somebody's like, okay, sing. And so Dawn comes up with a plan to have Kathy sing for Lena and behind the curtain, and then reveal like, oh yeah, it's actually Kathy singing, and that's how he's gonna show this. And so he doesn't tell that plan to Kathy because
Lena's
more
there.
Drama.
Yes, plus Lena's there, and so like they don't really have time.
Right. We just got to do it.
He's just like, I just gotta like, she can be mad at me for a second. She'll be happy with me in a second.
Right. Yes. kind of you can very much. Yeah. Kathy's all mad at him, and he's like, okay, this better work. And then he like goes, But yeah, so Kathy's singing behind the curtain, and Lena's all happy, and then they raise the curtain, and my favorite part is Cosmo then takes over the microphone. And Lena doesn't realize that the curtain has been raised at first, but then Cosmo starts singing, and she's like, and she runs off the stage all embarrassed. And so then Dawn gives the credit to Kathy. He's like, everybody look, that's who was the real voice. And then Kathy loves him again, and they sing a love song. And then it's happily ever
And
after.
then it's all great. And we had all the tap dancing and fun musical
Yes.
numbers throughout, and it's great.
And we're all good, and it's so good.
Yeah. It's such a fun story. I do feel like, so getting into the gospel principle,
Yes.
I'm
We did not do a good job of weaving
I feel like
that
we
in.
had to like kind of go through a lot of the plot before I can like tie all of my thoughts
Right.
together. So I studied the talk given by Elder Suarez in October 2023 General Conference, and it's called Brothers and Sisters in Christ. And it was a really, really great talk that really just applied. It was great. I mean, I literally just read this not long before we started recording, just to give myself background, but I'm really glad that I picked this one because it had a lot of really interesting thoughts in it. And one of them was, he says, it behooves each of us to do whatever we can in our spheres of influence to preserve the dignity and respect every son and daughter of God deserves. In reality, human dignity presupposes respect for our differences. And I really like that idea. I was thinking about this earlier today just because of some of the things within politics, and I was listening to an a biography of Marie Antoinette. It was not actually written by her.
Only.
Seriously, how fascinating would that be? But no, it was a biography about Marie Antoinette, and it's just been really sad because really she's just a woman in history who was very much dehumanized at the time of when she was living. And so she's been made out to be this terrible villainous woman who was just like sinning and doing all these horrible crazy things, but in reality like she was just a woman who liked being a mother and was kind of naive and stuff, but also really valued her role as a leader. Like the amount of times in this book it's talked about like she could have run or could have done this or that, but she felt duty bound to her husband to stay with him and to be there with him and be there for her country, for France, as well as for her homeland, and play the role she's supposed to play even when it's hard, even when she's like getting these terrible things yelled at her all the time in the streets and stuff. She's just like, no, I have a responsibility. I need to do that. But people at the time just really, they were so caught up in the politics of it all and the social needs of just, they were in a famine situation where there was a lot of difficulty getting food. And so they look at these, like sometimes, I mean, all throughout history, this happens where they're really struggling. And so you look to the people who seem to be better off and hate them. And so that's kind of what it's turned around to be. And so in watching this film, after thinking of that and then thinking about the gospel principle, this whole film is about the roles different people can play. Obviously, it's in a more like literal, like they're in a movie roles, but also I feel like just their characters really play around with that a lot. Like we talked about Dawn and Catherine respecting where each of them fit in the grand scheme of theater and theatrical like acting and that sort of thing, where they do different things but they are able to respect each other for their different types of entertainment that they're able to be a part of. We see Cosmo as well, where I love Cosmo. I think he's a great example of valuing people where they're at really well and valuing himself where he's at.
Yeah.
Like at the beginning of the movie, like one of the first things we see is he gets out of the car and they like announce him and like nobody cheers for him and he looks sad about it. Like it's not like he's like, oh, it's fine, whatever. Like he's not all hunky-dory, but he looks sad. And it would have been so easy for this movie to like turn him into like a bitter person who like hates his friend and like betrays him or something. Like that would have been such an easy storyline to play, especially because the film starts off kind of showing something like that. When Dawn comes a second later and everybody's like screaming and Cosmo like did not get that same reception, even though he does all the music for the films, that's his job. But he's just like the whole movie just like fine with his role, like, and he comes up with ideas and is able to get himself promoted. Like he uses his skills and talents to accomplish more and more things, but he never compares himself to his friend.
Yeah.
Which is really amazing. He values his friend and what his friend's able to do, but he also does value his own contribution equally.
Recognizing that like Dawn gets the fame and the glory, but like it also couldn't necessarily happen as well without what he does.
Yes, like he's super important and he loves it. Like
yes.
he likes doing what he's doing.
Yeah, so I read the talk. It's a BYU speech. I love those. I find so many good BYU speeches for this. By Dean M. Davies, who was a General Authority 70. It's called God Will Use You, God Will Bless You, and kind of talks about how God uses all of us in different ways and blesses us for what we do. So kind of focusing on how God will use you. I like it. I mean, with all of these characters, again, because they are literally playing parts in a movie, like it's so interesting to kind of look at all of those different important roles, right? Like the Dancing Cavalier, what they title the musical, never could have come together without Don having his vaudeville background and playing that main part, and Lena being the pretty face, and Kathy being her voice, and Cosmo doing music, you know? Like, it never would have happened, even though Lockwood and Lamont are the ones with the fame and the glory. I just love this quote. He kind of tells this story about how he's talking about the Philadelphia Temple and how kind of this local celebrity who was a football player and stuff and famous for a couple of different things, like, was able to use who he is and his testimony to help aid the process of getting the land for the Philadelphia Temple. But then he goes on to say, he's like God used this brother, he will use you. And he goes, but you might say, I'm no one special. I'm not a football player. I'm not a celebrity. I'm nobody. I'm average in every way. I'm not particularly smart, eloquent, coordinated, well-dressed, or even well-behaved. How could God use me? And I was reading that and I was like, whoa, that's what I would say. I'm like, okay, yeah, super cool that this local celebrity was able to be used by God. Like, that's amazing. But like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's not me. I'm not any of those things, and I'm pretty average, or even well behaved. I'm like, yeah, I'm about averagely well behaved too. Like, I normally feel like God is trying to get me up to his standards, like not using me to help progress his kingdom. And he says something that we all know. He says, don't you know that since the beginning of time, our Heavenly Father has reached out to those who were average and used them for his purposes? He quotes the Apostle Paul, which I absolutely love. God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. And talks about Gideon, who was a farmer, but God saw him as the man who would deliver Israel from bondage. I love this one. He says, when Samuel stood before the people to present them to their new young king Saul, the Bible tells us that Saul was so terrified that he hid himself among the stuff. I'm like, oh, Saul ran away. Anyway, so yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up Cosmo and kind of his part in all of this, because he's the comedic relief of the movie, you know, like hands down, there's not another title for him.
Yeah.
But I mean, he finds Kathy, you know, and when Don is down, he comforts him. He's able to use his musical skills and his value as a comedian to like bring Don up and remind him like, no, you are worthwhile and you can do this. And, you know, and so he's able to use what he has to help others. It's kind of interesting that even Lena doesn't actually have to be a bad guy. Like I mentioned, like this was a pretty normal thing at this time. Like Christopher Plummer doesn't sing in The Sound of Music. Like, you know, like left and right, there are lots of cases of people dubbing for others. But Lena just kind of takes it, like RF says, she goes a step too far, you know. She wants to suppress Kathy by forcing her to be her voice. And she wants to put somebody else down in that way, instead of, I mean, Lena could remain a really powerful figure in this era of talkies, you know, and instead she gets herself ruined by trying to ruin somebody else. And so now she's a laughingstock when she could have found a way to continue to have that popularity, that fame, and that glory. But yeah, I mean, because how many people would have been willing to be her voice and wanted to do that? Or if she had been kind about it, maybe Kathy would have been more willing to do that while being able to pursue other things, you know? There are lots of other ways that it could have gone, but instead Lena chooses to use her role as a really powerful and influential figure to bully somebody else, instead of trying to bring people up like she could have. Instead, she could have used it as an opportunity to help people in their career instead of trying to ruin somebody's. And so I think that's really interesting that we also have the choice to take the talents and the place and the relationships and whatever else we have that we've been given or have developed, and use them to help others and to bring Christ into people's lives, or to bring people down and to tear people apart.
I really like that thought about Lena. I feel like when I was watching, I felt that Lena was the most failed character in this film, because I feel like she was very dehumanized by everybody.
So you feel like she was failed by the writers,
the
who
writers
wrote her.
of the film, and the other characters by default into the story.
Yes.
Just because I feel like the whole time there's not a single person in this film who's actually nice to her.
That's
all,
true.
Ever.
That's true.
Like, they're constantly, like, even when they're talking to her in a friendly way, they're totally belittling her.
Yeah, they're patronizing her all the time.
Patronizing her all the time. And she knows it. So it's like, no wonder she's angry, because she's just like, and it seems to like stem, at least in the beginning, like the first thing we see with her and her interactions is people stopping her from talking. And like, it seems to stem from this, like, oh, her voice is annoying and we don't want to be embarrassed by it.
Yes.
And so, like, obviously she has this attitude that we see with Dawn, where she, like, doesn't treat him very well. But also that's been after she's been patronized and not allowed to talk in the movie industry. Like, by the time she meets Dawn, even when he is a nobody and she's somebody, she's still, like, a nobody in the fact that she's just very dehumanized in this situation. She's literally just there to look pretty. That's all. And she's been very objectified. And so I feel like because she earns them a lot of money, they feel like that's enough valuation to put on her. Like, oh, well, you get paid a lot of money and you like it, so like we don't need to give you any other value or see you as valuable in any other way. And I think that causes her to become more mean-spirited than she otherwise would have may have been. We don't know much about her because, again, like, the writers of the show don't give us much about her background or anything. I feel like if this film was written nowadays, it would have had a lot more emotional complexity, because that's just the movie era we're in, where that's just more of a thing, which both are good, but just, yeah, as far as like a conversation about valuing people and not dehumanizing people, it was just interesting to think about. And in Elder Suarez's talk, he discusses how we're all created in the image and likeness of God, how we all have a responsibility to promote respect for all of God's children, and that we all have a divine nature, heritage, and potential, and we need to value that. And I feel like Lena's just as much, I mean, if this was a real story, it's not, but if it was, she's just as much a daughter of God as Kathy is, and she's been treated really badly. And so I just, as I was reading this talk and thinking about this topic just in general with between the Marie Antoinette and this, I just never want to be the type of person that ever dehumanizes someone just because of disagreements, or because even if they are awful, like Lena is awful, like she's not nice, and it doesn't excuse her actions. But like, if I were to deal with someone like that, I may not want to hang out with them all the time, but I feel like I would try to make an effort to not treat them like the bad guy in the film, like to not treat her like she's the femme fatale and Kathy's the angel. And that's just really dehumanizing, and narrowing down the complexity that is a human being down into that. And that's when we can really start valuing differences. Like, the value we show another person should never be within worldly things. Like, for her, it was with money. Like, they thought they were showing value for her because she was making them money, and that's the value. Whereas that wasn't going to make her happy or make their relationship with her any better by treating her that way. So that was a big thing that watching this, it was just really interesting to kind of ponder on and think about just her characterization and how that could be expanded with this gospel principle.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I do appreciate that perspective. I could probably defend at least Dawn in a couple of different ways, but it doesn't matter ultimately.
And like I said, like, fair enough, she is awful.
Right.
It's just like, what really made her that way? Is she just naturally like that? Maybe on some level.
Right. But yeah, there are people in the world who we have to deal with like that, and like you said, she's a daughter of God, and she does have her part to play. If we bring it into the movie, like, she's Lena Lamont for a reason. Yes. Everybody loves her, and she brings a lot to what they're trying to accomplish. And And yeah, she's looked at as like a nuisance and a burden to be overcome in that process, rather than the shining star who's making it happen, you know? But she does what she does really, really well. And it's not really her fault that the industry is now changed and it's no longer what she does. So yeah, it's kind of, and Dawn forgets really quickly that he also wasn't good at it, and he just changed it into something that he was good at, and Lena also wasn't, you know, like, and again, not her fault, like,
absolutely.
And so everybody does have something to offer no matter what. And even if somebody is mean-spirited, like, God can make all things to our benefit, you know? God will make all things. If you meet somebody who is like that and who is mean-spirited, like, you can still remember, like, this person has a part to play, and I can take this person's part in my life and use it to recognize maybe the kind of person I want to be, or recognize maybe there's somebody who I wouldn't have noticed otherwise, but now I can see is being treated really poorly by this person and others, and I can be kinder to them, you know, like, any, whatever it might be, like, somebody in your life like that can play a part in helping you help others, or in helping you, or whatever it might be. But God will work it to your benefit and others' benefit.
I love that. Yeah. And just a total side note, if you want to see a more well-rounded character similar to Lena, actually the second Downton Abbey film, which we haven't watched yet, that's the one we haven't watched.
No, so I don't know about
You don't know about this. It kind of has a similar Singin' in the Rain, like, silent film to talkie situation where, like, the main female in the silent film has a terrible voice. And it literally does that thing, but she's more well-rounded as a character. So definitely check that out. There's some things about that film I don't like, particularly, I won't say what, but particularly with a certain character's relationship I don't love, but there's other things that I do like about it, and that's one of them. But I did want to read, just kind of in connection with this, and bringing it back to internal reflection too, of, like, not just your treatment of others, but your recognition of yourself and your own value and your own role to play in God's plan. My mom actually sent this, and it was a quote that was sent by my uncle to their group chat, in my uncle and aunt group chat, and it was from Sister Pat Holland. Rest in peace. We love her.
Yes. Dean M. Davies too, actually, were both, that's two quotes from very recently deceased persons. It's kind of interesting.
Huh. Well, rest in peace, these wonderful, wonderful people.
Yes. Thank you for your contributions.
Yes, you are doing good things even now.
Yes.
So, but this quote, I don't know exactly when it was from. It was found in the LDS Women's Treasury, Insights and Inspiration for Today's Women. So it's a little book that it's in. But she says, for many years, I tried to measure the oft-times quiet, reflective, thoughtful Pat Holland against the robust, bubbly, talkative, and energetic Jeff Holland and others with like qualities. I have learned through several fatiguing failures that you can't have joy in being bubbly if you are not a bubbly person, which I get along with so well.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Pat Holland. It is a contradiction in terms. I have given up seeing myself as a flawed person because my energy level is lower than Jeff's, and I don't talk as much as he does, nor as fast. Giving this up has freed me up to embrace and rejoice in my own manner and personality in the measure of my creation. Ironically, that has allowed me to admire and enjoy Jeff's ebullience. I was like, I don't know if I can say this, even more. Somewhere, somehow, the Lord blipped the message onto my screen that my personality was created to fit precisely the mission and talents he gave me. For example, the quieter, calmer talent of playing the piano reveals much about the real Pat Holland. I would never have learned to play the piano if I hadn't enjoyed the long hours of solitude required for its development. This same principle applies to my love of writing, reading, meditation, and especially teaching and talking with my children. Miraculously, I have found that I have untold, abundant sources of energies to be myself. But the moment I indulge in imitation of my neighbor, I feel fractured and fatigued, and I indulge in and find myself forever swimming upstream. When we frustrate God's plan for us, we deprive this world and God's kingdom of our unique contributions, and a serious schism settles in our soul. God never gave us any task beyond our ability to accomplish it. We just have to be willing to do it our own way. We will always have enough resources for being who we are and what we can become. I just love that.
That is absolutely
so
beautiful.
Much. Isn't it so good?
That
I
is amazing. I feel like crying a little bit. Oh my gosh.
So just
that might be a book worth buying.
Love it. Yeah. So it's just focus on the fact that God made us each unique for a reason. Like we have a part we need to play. We have qualities and things that are needed in God's kingdom as we are. We don't need to be someone else, but we do need to learn to value others' contributions as well. And I like that she talks about how she was able to appreciate Jeff's ebullience. I was going to try it again, still probably failed, but she was able to enjoy that even more and admire that even more because of her better appreciation for herself. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that God, he knows what he's doing in his grand plan, and that means every little cog and every little piece is in the right place at the right time. He knows what he's doing. And sometimes I think we forget that, or we think that somehow he doesn't know what he's doing with us. And that's just, like, not true. He knows what's up. He knows what he's doing. Great. I feel like there's not much else to say after Pat Holland's great quote.
Pat can close it out.
So, yes, that will be where we ended, I think. But, yeah, this was great. I liked this discussion, so hopefully you guys did too. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe or leave a like/review, depending on where you're watching, listening. Also, follow us on Instagram if you're interested in seeing what we have going on there. We have some fun reels, we have some just spiritual posts and some updates on upcoming videos and things like that, upcoming episodes. Also, if you're interested in seeing what I'm reading just in general in a non-spiritual sense, you can check out my channel Good Strong Words on YouTube. I talk about all my reading over there and it's great. Thank you again so much for watching, listening. We hope you are having a wonderful week. Keep remembering to see God in all things, and we will see you next time. Bye!
Bye!